that lived in that tree last year had built a nest. This year, because spring was early, the geese came back, and this goose has taken over that nest. And so this goose is now nesting 30 feet off the ground. He said, "Is that real?" He checked it on the internet and looked it up, and yes, there is possible that a goose will take over another nest of another bird if it's available. So he has these two geese that are nesting 30 feet up in the air in his backyard. Relationship. How do you see relationship? How do you see it? One of the questions is one man, one woman. The Scripture is very clear on laying that out as a guideline for us. Husband and wife, we read the passage. How God created, and He gave man, and He said man's not good by himself. He needs a helper, he needs a helpmate. And so God took His rib and made a woman and put them together and said, "This is good. This is good. This is what I intended. This is what I planned. This is the relationship. One woman, one man." As God did that, one of the things in regard to design, as we follow that through, is very important. God put a boundary around that one woman and one man, and He said there needs to be thanks and there needs to be respect. Those are two things that need to exist around relationship. And as you look at that relationship needs to have that boundary. In Romans chapter 1, and we'll look at that in just a moment, God says, "For since the creation of the world and His invisible attributes, His eternal power, and His divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. For even though they knew God, they did not honor Him as God or give thanks. But they became futile in their speculation, and their foolish heart was darkened." God says, when I made man, I intended man to have two things in response to me. One was respect for me, and the other one was to be thankful. You go to the Garden of Eden, and the first thing Adam and Eve did is they didn't respect the things that God said. God said, "Don't eat of the tree, enjoy absolutely everything." And they said, "You know what? That's not true. We don't respect what God has to say." The other thing was they weren't thankful. They could have everything but the tree. And they said, "No, we want the tree. We don't want everything else." And God says, because you run into that difficulty, the relationship that I planned for you is now going to be messed up. And what will happen with that relationship is there's some pitfalls. There's adultery. There's fornication. Sex before marriage. There's pornography. There's lesbianism, there's homosexuality, there's bestiality, there's incest. All of those things are things when you move away from the value of one woman, one man. God says, "You know what? I knew that was coming." He says, "I knew that was coming because I saw it in your heart. When you rejected honor and thanks, that's the natural thing where I gave it up for." And so when you read Romans, he says, "For even though they knew God, they did not honor Him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculations, and their foolish heart was darkened." If you read the rest of Romans 1, it will tell you, what does God do? He lets them go. He lets them jump into homosexuality. He lets them jump into relationship and abuse and all of the things, gossip, slander, and abusers, and all of those things. And then He says, you know what? He says, you have a party doing that. He says, you have a party going and doing those kind of things. What God intended is God intended that you would have a struggle and that He would put this insulating barrier around your relationship. And so you ask the question, what happens? Why is there a struggle? What is the relationship? What is the struggle? Well, the struggle really is this. The struggle is that you are fighting to stay in your relationship. The tendency is that you would look on the outside, and you would look at the outside, and you would push the boundary. And the question is, what will keep you in your marriage? What will keep you inside? God says there's only one thing that will keep you inside. There is only one thing that will keep you loyal on the inside. That will be respect, and that will be thanks. You see, if you're not thankful for your relationship, then you go and look for another one. If you don't have enough respect, then you will look somewhere else. And so your eye gate and your heart and your actions and your behavior begins to wander. Why? Because you're pushing out of the boundaries. And God says in Romans chapter 1, He says, you start at preserving that as going back to this one here, respect and thanks. That's an individual thing that occurs inside of each individual. That's something that the man has to look after. That's something the woman has to look after. Are you really thankful for this relationship? Remember when that block comes in and that irritant, does it swing you into thanksgiving and respect, or does it act as an interference and suddenly come in and create that interference and you say, you know what, I'm not really very thankful. My wife nags on me, or my husband rats on me and nags at me. I don't like that. You know what? There are other people out there who don't do that. I don't have to be thankful for that. I don't have to give respect. There's a huge thing here in regard to respect. When you get married and when you find someone to love, what you do is you look for that person and you look for the visual. And as you look for the visual, you give the person a 10 based on what you see. And so you look at them and there's all this unknown, all this underground stuff, and you have no idea, but you give them a 10. You give them respect. It's a gift. And you say, I don't know what you're like, but you're pretty, you're handsome, you're smart, and if you're really not smart, I'm too dumb to know right now because I think you are. Okay? If you're not beautiful, I just think you're beautiful. You see, in your mind, all of a sudden, you gave the gift of respect. You gave that person a 10 rather than a 1. What happens when you go along in your marriage? What happens as you go along and you begin to work with each other? You look at that person and you see their report card and you find out you're not smart, you're dumb. I can't tell you you're dumb, I just know you're dumb. I thought you were beautiful, you're homely. I just wasn't looking around to see what was available that day. You see, all of a sudden, you look, and as you come to those realizations, what you do is, all of a sudden, some of the things you saw changed. And what you do is you drop respect. When you drop respect, you change your definition of your respect, and you say, you know what? Respect is earned. Did you bring me coffee in bed? Did you open the door for me? Did you send me a note? Did you phone me and tell me what was going on? Did you apologize? Did you bring me flowers? Did you treat me right? And you say, oh, you didn't do that. You don't deserve respect. Other people do that. You don't deserve to be treated worthy and valuable. And so what do? You move your respect from a 10 down to a 3 on the basis that the person doesn't behave right. And so suddenly, instead of treating them as somebody who has respect and value, now you say, you know what, you don't respond right, you don't do things right, I don't have to treat you right. And as a result, what happens is, instead of thanksgiving and respect enlarging, you shrink it down so that it's right tight. How does that affect your wanting to look over and look on the outside? If you destroy respect, what's going to keep you inside? If you destroy thanks, what's going to keep you inside? Other people give me respect. Other people give me that grace and that expectation of being thankful, and they compliment me and they tell me I'm good and they tell me I'm worthwhile and they treat me like as if I'm good to be around and I'm fun. And now all of a sudden our spouse doesn't do that, and so we say, you know what, there's no reason to stay in this relationship. You want to protect from these things on the outside.